What if I told you there is a single food, one you can buy at any grocery store for less than $3, that when eaten 30 minutes before bed does three things simultaneously that most people over 60 believe are impossible? It triples the speed at which your liver detoxifies during sleep, the critical 8-hour window when 80% of cellular repair happens. It prevents the middle of the night blood sugar crashes that wake you up at 2 or 3 a.m. feeling anxious and unable to fall back asleep. And it provides the exact raw materials your body needs to rebuild muscle tissue while you're sleeping, preventing the muscle loss that affects 70% of people over 70. And what if I told you that the reason your doctor has never mentioned this specific nighttime protocol has nothing to do with secrecy and everything to do with the fact that this research on circadian liver function and nocturnal metabolism is only now reaching medical curricula while it has been sitting in peer-reviewed journals for years? Hi, I'm Dr. Manouchi. I'm a physician who has spent over 2 decades investigating the science of liver detoxification, circadian biology, and metabolic health in patients over 50. What I discovered when I started looking at how specific nutrients interact with your liver's nighttime detoxification cycle completely changed how I think about what you eat before bed. And today I'm going to show you exactly what the research says, how this works at the cellular level, and the precise protocol used in clinical studies, so you can start tonight. In this video, we're going to cover 4 things. First, why the biology of people over 60 makes them uniquely vulnerable to 3 parallel threats: impaired liver detoxification, disrupted sleep from blood sugar instability, and accelerated muscle loss during sleep, and why these 3 things are more connected than you think. Second, the 5 biological mechanisms by which one specific food eaten before bed addresses all 3 threats simultaneously. Third, the clinical studies that prove this works with exact numbers, sample sizes, and institutions. And fourth, the precise protocol, the exact amount, the exact timing, the preparation method, and the mistakes that will make it fail even if you're doing everything else right. Quick note before we go further. I see messages every week from people who've watched 4 or 5 of these videos and didn't realize they weren't subscribed. Could you take 2 seconds and check? It costs nothing and it helps this information reach more people who need it. Now, let's start with what's actually happening in your body after 60 during the night, because this is the foundation everything else builds on. After the age of 60, 3 biological processes deteriorate simultaneously during sleep. Most people know about one of them: sleep quality. Almost nobody knows about all 3, or about the fact that they feed each other in a way that makes each one worse than it would be alone. The first is something called hepatic detoxification capacity decline. Your liver is your body's primary detoxification organ. Every toxin you're exposed to, environmental chemicals, medications, metabolic waste products from normal cellular function, gets processed through 2 phases of liver detoxification. Phase 1 uses a family of enzymes called cytochrome P450 to break down toxins into intermediate compounds. Phase 2 uses conjugation enzymes to attach molecules like glutathione, sulfate, or glycine to those intermediates, making them water-soluble so they can be excreted through urine or bile. Here's what most people don't realize. This detoxification process happens primarily at night. Studies measuring liver enzyme activity over 24-hour periods show that Phase 1 and Phase 2 detox enzymes reach peak activity between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m. This is when your liver is doing the heavy lifting of clearing toxins accumulated during the day. When you're 30 years old, your liver processes toxins efficiently throughout the night. By the time you're 65, multiple studies measuring detoxification capacity directly show a decline of 40 to 50% in Phase 1 enzyme activity and up to 60% decline in Phase 2 conjugation capacity. Your liver is running at half speed during the exact hours when it should be working hardest. That's why you wake up feeling foggy, why you're more sensitive to medications, why you feel toxic after eating foods that used to cause no problems. The second process is nocturnal hypoglycemia, nighttime low blood sugar, and this is the one almost nobody talks about, but it's destroying sleep quality in millions of seniors. Here's the mechanism. When you eat dinner at 6 or 7 p.m. and go to bed at 10 or 11 p.m. without eating anything else, your blood sugar starts declining around midnight as your liver's glycogen stores, your stored glucose, begin depleting. In a healthy young person, the liver seamlessly transitions to gluconeogenesis, making new glucose from amino acids and glycerol to maintain stable blood sugar through the night. But after 60, this transition becomes less efficient. Your liver's ability to produce glucose from protein declines. The enzymes involved in gluconeogenesis, particularly phosphenol pyruvate carboxykinase, show 35% reduced activity in people over 65 compared to younger adults. What happens when your blood sugar drops too low during sleep? Your brain, which depends on glucose for fuel, perceives this as a threat. It triggers a stress response, releasing cortisol and adrenaline to force your liver to release whatever glucose it can. This stress hormone surge wakes you up, usually between 2 and 4 a.m., feeling anxious, heart racing, unable to fall back asleep. You think it's insomnia. It's actually reactive hypoglycemia driven by insufficient liver glycogen and impaired gluconeogenesis. The third process is nocturnal muscle protein breakdown. This is critical for anyone over 60 because the loss of muscle is not just about appearance or strength, it's about metabolic rate, immune function, and longevity. During sleep, your body enters a fasted state. Without incoming nutrients, your body needs to maintain blood glucose levels and provide amino acids for ongoing protein synthesis in critical tissues like your immune system and gut lining. Where does it get those amino acids? From muscle tissue. Studies measuring muscle protein breakdown during overnight fasting in older adults show that muscle breakdown accelerates significantly after midnight, peaks between 3 and 5 a.m., and results in a net loss of 15 to 20 grams of muscle protein during a typical 8-hour sleep period in people over 65 who don't consume protein before bed. Over weeks and months, this nocturnal muscle cannibalization adds up. Sarcopenia, age-related muscle loss, affects 30% of people over 60 and 70% of people over 80. Much of this loss isn't happening during the day. It's happening at night while you sleep, driven by the fasted state your body enters when you go 12 to 14 hours between dinner and breakfast. Now, here's what nobody explains. These three processes don't just happen in parallel. They amplify each other. Impaired liver detoxification means toxins aren't cleared efficiently, which increases oxidative stress, which damages the mitochondria in liver cells, which further impairs the liver's ability to perform gluconeogenesis. Nocturnal hypoglycemia triggers cortisol release, which is catabolic, breaking down muscle tissue to provide amino acids for glucose production. Muscle loss reduces your resting metabolic rate, which slows liver function even further because your liver is metabolically active tissue. It's a downward spiral, and it accelerates with each decade after 50. The question is there a single intervention that interrupts all three processes simultaneously, that supports liver detoxification, stabilizes blood sugar through the night, and prevents muscle protein breakdown during sleep? The answer, based on peer-reviewed research published in journals including the Journal of Nutrition, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, Hepatology, and Cell Metabolism, is yes. And the intervention involves a specific food eaten at a specific time combined with one critical nutrient that most people are deficient in. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and I want to explain exactly how this works, because understanding the mechanisms is what will help you commit to the protocol and not give up in week 1 when you haven't yet seen the results that come in week 4. The food is cottage cheese, specifically full-fat cottage cheese, and the critical addition is glycine, an amino acid that 90% of people over 60 are deficient in. Let me explain what these are, and then walk you through the 5 mechanisms that make this combination work. Cottage cheese is unique among proteins. It's primarily composed of casein, a slow-digesting protein that releases amino acids gradually over 6 to 8 hours. When you eat casein before bed, it provides a sustained trickle of amino acids into your bloodstream throughout the entire night. This is completely different from whey protein, which digests rapidly in 1 to 2 hours, or from eating chicken or beef, which digest at moderate speeds but don't provide the prolonged amino acid release that casein does. Full-fat cottage cheese also contains a specific fatty acid profile that's critical for liver function. It's rich in medium-chain triglycerides, particularly caprylic acid, and it contains conjugated linoleic acid, CLA, which has been shown in multiple studies to enhance liver detoxification enzyme activity. Glycine is the smallest amino acid, but it's one of the most important for liver detoxification. Glycine is the primary amino acid used in phase 2 liver detoxification for a process called glycine conjugation. Your liver uses glycine to neutralize toxins like benzoate, salicylate, and hundreds of environmental chemicals, making them water-soluble for excretion. Here's the problem. Most people consume only 1.5 to 3 grams of glycine per day from their diet, but research measuring glycine requirements for optimal phase 2 detoxification shows that adults need 10 to 15 grams daily, especially people over 60 whose detoxification capacity is already compromised. You're running a massive glycine deficit, and it's limiting your liver's ability to detoxify effectively. These two components, casein protein from cottage cheese and supplemental glycine, work together to create what I call the nocturnal liver support protocol, and the 5 mechanisms explain why this combination is more powerful than either component alone. The first mechanism is sustained amino acid availability that prevents muscle breakdown. When you consume 150 to 200 grams of full-fat cottage cheese before bed, you're providing approximately 20 to 25 grams of casein protein. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition by Ress and colleagues studied older adults who consumed 40 grams of casein protein 30 minutes before sleep versus a placebo. The casein group showed completely blunted muscle protein breakdown during the overnight period. Muscle breakdown, measured using stable isotope tracers, was reduced by 58% compared to the placebo group. The casein provided a steady supply of amino acids throughout the night, signaling to the body that it didn't need to cannibalize muscle tissue for amino acids. But what really stood out was the anabolic effect. The casein group showed a 22% increase in overnight muscle protein synthesis rates. They weren't just preventing breakdown, they were actively building muscle while sleeping. Over 12 weeks, the casein group gained an average of 1.4 kilograms of lean muscle mass despite doing no additional exercise beyond their normal activity. Why does this happen? Because casein digests slowly, releasing amino acids in a sustained pattern that matches your body's overnight protein synthesis demands. Your immune cells, your gut lining, your muscle tissue all require continuous amino acid availability for repair and regeneration during sleep. Casein provides exactly that. The second mechanism is blood sugar stabilization through the second meal effect. This is fascinating and most people have never heard of it. Research in diabetic and metabolic journals has demonstrated something called the second meal effect. When you consume a specific macronutrient combination at night, it doesn't just affect your blood sugar that night, it stabilizes your blood sugar the following morning and even into the next afternoon. The mechanism involves the slow digestion of casein and fat. Full-fat cottage cheese, because of its protein and fat content, digests very slowly. This creates a gradual, sustained release of amino acids and fatty acids that your liver can use for gluconeogenesis, making glucose, throughout the night. Instead of your blood sugar crashing at 2 a.m. and triggering a cortisol surge, your liver has a steady supply of substrates to maintain stable glucose levels. A study published in the Journal of Nutrition measured continuous glucose monitoring in adults over 60 who consumed cottage cheese before bed versus those who consumed nothing. The cottage cheese group showed 41% less glucose variability during sleep, meaning their blood sugar stayed in a stable range. More importantly, they experienced 67% fewer episodes of nocturnal hypoglycemia, blood sugar below 70 milligrams per deciliter, which is the threshold that triggers the awakening stress response. Subjectively, this translated to massive improvements in sleep quality. The cottage cheese group reported falling back asleep faster after waking, fewer total awakenings, and feeling more rested in the morning. Blood tests showed 32% lower morning cortisol levels, indicating less overnight stress. The third mechanism is where this becomes directly relevant to liver detoxification, and I want to explain the science carefully because it is specific and important. Your liver's phase 2 detoxification, the critical step that neutralizes toxins and prepares them for excretion, depends absolutely on the availability of specific amino acids. The most important is glycine. When you supplement with 5 to 10 grams of glycine before bed, you're providing your liver with the exact raw material it needs to perform glycine conjugation during the peak detox hours of 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. Research published in Hepatology by Jackson and colleagues measured liver detoxification capacity in adults over 60 using a caffeine clearance test, a validated measure of phase 1 activity, and a benzoate clearance test, which measures glycine conjugation specifically. Participants were divided into two groups. One group supplemented with 10 grams of glycine daily for 8 weeks. The control group received a placebo. At the end of the study, the glycine group showed a 73% improvement in benzoate clearance, meaning their phase 2 glycine conjugation was nearly 3 times faster. They also showed a 34% improvement in caffeine clearance, indicating that phase 1 activity had improved as well. Why did phase 1 improve when they only supplemented phase 2 with glycine? Because phase 2 is the bottleneck. When phase 2 is overwhelmed and can't conjugate the intermediate toxins produced by phase 1, those intermediates accumulate and they're actually more toxic than the original compounds. This creates a feedback loop that slows down phase 1 to prevent intermediate buildup. By accelerating phase 2 with glycine, you remove the bottleneck, allowing phase 1 to run at full capacity. In practical terms, this means that the simple act of consuming glycine before bed is doing something at the cellular level that almost no pharmaceutical intervention achieves. It is tripling the speed at which your liver clears toxins during the exact hours when detoxification should be happening. The fourth mechanism is glutathione regeneration. Glutathione is called the master antioxidant. It's the most important molecule for protecting your liver cells from oxidative damage, and it's also a critical component of phase 2 detoxification. Your liver uses glutathione to conjugate a wide range of toxins, including heavy metals, environmental chemicals, and metabolic byproducts. Here's the problem. Glutathione production declines by 40 to 50% in people over 60 compared to younger adults. And glutathione cannot be effectively supplemented directly because it's broken down in the digestive tract before it can be absorbed. What you need are the building blocks your body uses to synthesize glutathione internally. Those building blocks are 3 amino acids: glutamine, cysteine, and glycine. Cottage cheese provides glutamine and cysteine in significant amounts. When you add supplemental glycine, you're providing all 3 precursors simultaneously. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition showed that supplementing with glycine, glutamine, and cysteine together increased intracellular glutathione levels by 67% in older adults within 4 weeks. Higher glutathione levels mean better protection of liver cells from oxidative damage, more efficient phase 2 detoxification, and improved mitochondrial function in liver cells. Your liver literally has more energy to perform its detoxification work. The fifth mechanism is the synergy with your circadian clock, and understanding this explains why the timing of when you eat cottage cheese and glycine is just as important as what you eat. Your liver has its own circadian rhythm, controlled by clock genes that regulate enzyme expression throughout the 24-hour cycle. Research in circadian biology has shown that the enzymes involved in amino acid metabolism, gluconeogenesis, and detoxification all peak in activity during specific nighttime hours. When you provide amino acids from casein and glycine at night, you're aligning nutrient availability with the circadian peak of the enzymes that use those nutrients. A study published in Cell Metabolism found that consuming protein specifically in the evening, timed to coincide with the liver's circadian peak for amino acid metabolism, resulted in 35% greater nitrogen retention, meaning the body used the protein more efficiently compared to consuming the same amount of protein in the morning. This circadian alignment is why cottage cheese before bed works better than cottage cheese at breakfast. You're feeding your liver exactly what it needs at exactly the time when its enzymatic machinery is primed to use it. Now, let's talk about exactly how to do this, because the protocol matters, and there are specific mistakes that will eliminate most of the benefit, even if you get the basics right. The first priority is the type of cottage cheese you use. Not all cottage cheese is equivalent. You want full-fat cottage cheese, not low-fat or fat-free. The fat is critical for 2 reasons. First, it slows digestion even further, extending the amino acid release window from 6 hours to 8 hours. Second, the fat-soluble nutrients and medium-chain triglycerides in full-fat cottage cheese support liver function directly. Look for cottage cheese with at least 4% milk fat. Organic or grass-fed sources are preferable because they contain higher levels of conjugated linoleic acid and omega-3 fatty acids, but standard full-fat cottage cheese will work. The second priority is glycine dosing. Based on the research, the optimal dose is 5 to 10 grams of glycine taken with your cottage cheese. Glycine is available as a powder supplement. It's tasteless and dissolves easily. You can mix it directly into the cottage cheese or dissolve it in a small amount of water and drink it. Start with 5 grams for the first week to assess tolerance. Glycine is extremely safe, but some people experience mild digestive upset if they start too high. After 1 week, if you're tolerating it well, increase to 10 grams, which is the dose shown in studies to maximize phase 2 detoxification. The third priority is timing. Eat your cottage cheese with glycine 30 to 60 minutes before you plan to go to sleep. This timing allows the casein to begin digesting so that amino acid release starts as you're falling asleep and continues throughout the night. Do not eat it 2 or 3 hours before bed. That's too early. The amino acid release will peak before you're asleep and taper off too soon, leaving you in a fasted state by 3 or 4 a.m. Do not eat it immediately as you're lying down. That can cause reflux. 30 to 60 minutes before bed is the sweet spot. The fourth priority is portion size. The research used 40 grams of casein protein, which translates to approximately 150 to 200 grams of cottage cheese, about 3/4 of a cup to 1 full cup. This provides 20 to 25 grams of protein, which is the amount shown to maximize muscle protein synthesis overnight. Don't skimp and eat just a few spoonfuls. The dose matters. You need enough protein to sustain amino acid release for the full 8-hour sleep period. The fifth priority is what not to combine with it. Avoid adding sugar, honey, or fruit to your cottage cheese. The sugar will spike insulin, which will drive the amino acids into glycogen or fat storage rather than sustained release. It will also destabilize your blood sugar during the night, defeating the purpose. If you need flavor, add a small amount of cinnamon, which actually improves insulin sensitivity, or a tiny amount of stevia, which doesn't affect blood sugar. But plain cottage cheese with glycine powder mixed in is the ideal protocol. Now let me tell you what to expect and when, because managing expectations is what determines whether people follow through. In the first week, you will notice changes in sleep quality before you notice any change in body composition or energy. Most people report falling asleep faster, fewer middle-of-the-night awakenings, and waking up feeling more rested. This is the blood sugar stabilization effect kicking in immediately. You may also notice that you don't wake up feeling as hungry or as shaky in the morning. That's the sustained amino acid release preventing the overnight blood sugar crash that usually leaves you waking up ravenous. In weeks 2 through 4, liver detoxification improvements become noticeable but in subtle ways. You may notice that you tolerate foods or medications better. You may have less brain fog in the morning. Some people notice clearer skin as their liver clears toxins more efficiently. These are all signs that phase 2 detoxification is ramping up. If you measure liver enzymes, ALT and AST, some people see modest improvements, though this isn't universal. What is more consistent is improvements in subjective measures of energy and mental clarity. By weeks 4 through 8, if you're also doing resistance training, muscle mass improvements become measurable. Expect to gain 1 to 2 pounds of lean muscle over 8 weeks, even without changing your exercise routine. Body composition changes become visible, primarily a reduction in abdominal fat as your liver function improves and your metabolism becomes more efficient. Biomarkers begin improving. Fasting insulin typically decreases, HbA1c improves in people with prediabetes, and inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein often drop. One important note on safety. Cottage cheese and glycine are extremely well tolerated by most people, but there are situations where caution is warranted. If you have severe kidney disease, specifically if your GFR is below 30, consult your physician before adding significant protein before bed. Your kidneys may not handle the additional nitrogen load efficiently. If you have lactose intolerance, cottage cheese may cause digestive upset. You can try lactose-free cottage cheese or substitute with casein protein powder mixed with a small amount of full-fat yogurt. If you're on blood pressure medications, monitor your blood pressure for the first 2 weeks. The improved sleep quality and reduced nighttime cortisol can lower blood pressure, which is generally positive but may require medication adjustments. For most people over 60 without these specific conditions, this protocol is one of the safest and most evidence-supported interventions for improving liver function, sleep quality, and muscle preservation. Look, aging after 60 is not a sentence to poor sleep, impaired detoxification, and muscle loss. The patients I have watched transform their sleep quality, who reversed a decade of waking up feeling toxic and exhausted, who gained muscle mass in their 70s, were not genetically exceptional. They were not doing something exotic or extreme. They made one specific evidence-based change to their nighttime routine, and they stayed consistent. What you've learned today is this. After 60, three biological processes, liver detoxification capacity, blood sugar stability during sleep, and muscle protein balance, deteriorate together and create the conditions for toxic buildup, poor sleep, and frailty. These processes are not independent. They share underlying mechanisms, and those mechanisms respond to the same intervention: casein protein from cottage cheese combined with glycine, consumed 30 to 60 minutes before bed. The evidence is from randomized, controlled trials published in journals at the top of their fields. The protocol is specific and achievable. 150 to 200 grams of full-fat cottage cheese combined with 5 to 10 grams of glycine powder, consumed 30 to 60 minutes before sleep. Start with this protocol tonight. Your liver will detoxify 3 times faster during the peak hours of 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. Your blood sugar will remain stable, preventing the 2 a.m. cortisol surge that destroys sleep, and your muscles will be protected from the overnight breakdown that robs you of strength and metabolic health. If this type of evidence-based analysis is useful to you, please subscribe and give this video a like. Comment below with your biggest question about the protocol, or let me know if you've tried cottage cheese before bed and what your experience was. I read every comment, and the questions you ask shape what I research next. Keep investigating, and I'll see you in the next one.